All right, there you have it. The initial 53-man roster for the Buffalo Bills is now out there. Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone podcast, everyone. Kevin Carroll, Andy Young. Andy Young, a bit of a Nostradamus when it comes to the 53-man roster. Looking into the future, Andy, we'll go through it and break it all down, but you had a good pre-announcement thoughts on what you thought it was going to come out to be, and you pretty much nailed it on the head. Good job, sir.
Thank you. For those old school WWF, WWE fans, let's harken back to the 1992 Royal Rumble. Ric Flair wins it in the locker room, holding up the belt, wins the championship. And he and Bobby Heenan and Mr. Perfect say, hate to say I told you so, but I told you so.
Bobby the Brain Heenan. Didn't think I was going to hear that.
We're going
today.
deep cuts here, but yeah, looking at my 53-man roster projection, I pretty much nailed it. Every single guy who I thought would be there is there, even the number of positions at those groups.
Mm-hmm.
The only miscue I had was Cedric Van Pran Granger. I had him going on physically unable to perform to start the season because we hadn't seen him practice all summer.
Right.
With Tylen Grable on the 53-man roster. Instead, it's Grable who goes to injured reserve. He's been dealing with a concussion, and the Bills have activated Cedric Van Pran Granger along the offensive line. But other than that, got to say, I nailed it.
Awesome. And I stole what you wrote down and put it on air the other day. So there you go.
That's what we do here. It's a symbiotic relationship.
But, yeah, it's amazing. You mentioned injured reserve. We'll get to this just off the jump. Maxwell Hairston, rookie cornerback, goes on injured reserve but is designated to return, Andy. So the guy you went after in the draft, your top guy, is scheduled to return early in the season as he's on pace, slowly getting better from that knee injury that he suffered at St. John Fisher.
Yeah, this is the sensible move to me with Maxwell Hairston. Of course, you're not going to put him out there if he's not ready with his sprained LCL, and so he's working his way back from that. We saw him in practice last week off to the side, working with trainers a little bit more. It's not necessarily high-impact, heavy work that we've seen yet, but he's coming along. And this gives the Bills the chance to slow play this. They're often cautious with injuries, especially with a rookie who hasn't played at all in the preseason, only really had a week of training camp. Even if he's close to ready before that 4 weeks is up when he's eligible to return, this gives them a ramping up period for him. Get back on the practice field, get his legs under him, no pun intended, and make sure he's fully recovered and good to go once that first 4 weeks of the season is up and he can then play week 5. This then opens up the door for what's going on with Trey White.
Right.
And his injury.
Well, we still don't really know, but I will say this. They move on from Dane Jackson, Daquan Hardy, the other cornerback that was waived by the team. And when I first saw that, you don't want to read too much into everything, but I thought if there was something really bad with Trey, they'd at least keep Dane around for a little bit as someone who's familiar with the system. I think we saw Rasul Douglas go to the Dolphins ahead of 53-man roster. So, anyone with any thought out there that might happen. So, I don't know. We're going to find out eventually. We're going to hear from Brandon Beane this week. Someone's got to know something that's going on with Trey White.
So there's a few different scenarios here with Tre'Davious White, and we can kind of go down the road of what is possible. First is they think he's healthy. He's going to be healthy and good to go for week 1. That would be the best case scenario for them.
Yep.
Tre'Davious White not on injured reserve to start the season, so presumably there's some chance that he's close. If he's not, maybe say they think he's going to be ready week 2 or week 3. Maybe do you bring Dane Jackson back to the practice squad and then bring him up as a veteran call-up who you can either start if you really want to,
right,
or have him as insurance for Dorian Strong, the rookie, or Jamarcus Ingram, who made the roster 53 outright.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple other options. They could, tomorrow or any time in the next couple of weeks, put Trey on injured reserve, designated to return. They get 8 total of those throughout the course of the season, only 2 prior to 53-man roster cuts.
I got you.
So they could still put him on designated to return and bring in a free agent or do the Dane Jackson scenario that I just talked about. There's all sorts of different things they can do here. Or they can just say, if he's not ready to go, we're going to ride with Dorian Strong and Jamarcus Ingram.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a few different options here. It's still not crystal clear, but I think for the overall consideration for Trey's health, this is probably a good sign, but we'll see in the coming days.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, hopefully we'll hear something from Brandon Beane as we move through this stuff. One of the other big talking points we got into was that defensive line, Andy, and you have two guys that are suspended now. They cannot be with the team right now for 6 games. And then a lot of young players, Andy, who I think adjusted pretty well to at least the preseason games as we went through preseason 1, preseason 2, preseason 3.
So the defensive line was pretty straightforward to my mind. So you have Michael Hoyt, Larry Ogunjobi, one a defensive end, one a defensive tackle, both guys suspended for the first 6 games of the season for PED use, for performance-enhancing drugs. So you don't have to worry about those guys. They're on the shelf. They're out the first 6 games. They got a bye week 7, so they'll be ready to go week 8. There was some talk of, do you cut Ogunjobi or trade him, something like that? Well, no, this works to my mind because this could all play itself out throughout the course of the season. Injuries.
Right. Now,
guys don't perform.
I never thought it would make sense to just move on from him if you have that time to just keep him on the roster in case.
It's good to have options, and then you figure it out in week 8.
Yeah.
Say one of these defensive tackles or defensive ends gets banged up, or they're just flat out not performing.
Mm-hmm.
And, hey, all right, we got this Ogunjobi character who we can bring in and get him rolling, right? Fresh. You look at the defensive line. Joey Bosa, no-brainer. Gregory Rousseau, no-brainer. A.J. Epinesa back for his final season under his current contract at least. Javon Solomon, second season. Landon Jackson, the rookie. Solomon and Jackson probably duke it out for inactive on game day, I'm guessing.
Okay.
Depending on the game, right? And then at defensive tackle, Ed Oliver. Daquan Jones, there had been some talk. Would they move on from him and save some cap space? In that Super Bowl window, veteran guy, he's been a starter. He's been running with the ones all throughout training camp and the preseason. So you keep Daquan Jones. Then you've got the promising rookies, TJ Sanders, Deion Walker, who's absolutely flashed. Both of those guys really have. And then Dwayne Carter. There's been some discussion where he falls in the pecking order. His second season now, where does he fall in all this? Was he somebody that they could say maybe trade for a late-round pick just because of the numbers game and they're ready to move on? Clearly not ready to move on yet. So defensive line, you keep 10 guys, and then when those 2 other guys come back in October, November, whatever it is, all right, let's see where we are.
Yeah. And the safety position, I think, played out how you pretty much thought it would play out. I mean, I get that we've been talking about Cole Bishop for a couple of weeks and him needing to get up to speed, and even Sean McDermott saying he's looking for a guy to play opposite Taylor Rapp. The whole time, I just figured that was coach speak. They were just getting him into position. And, I mean, I said at points last year, and I thought about a few times that they might move on from DeMar. But I think with how that safety unit is set up right now, they're in a good spot with what they have.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some players that are getting kind of bristly about the Cole Bishop talk. I just get that sense. I won't say any more.
Okay.
But Sean McDermott mentioned it himself, so we'll talk about it, right? And he's been hurt. But here we are. I'm expecting Rapp and Bishop to be your starters, and they're going to ride with that. They've got DeMar Hamlin as a backup and the rookie Jordan Hancock, who did show some things, did bang up his shoulder against the Bears. This obviously a good sign that he's probably going to be okay. Derek Forrest never really materialized. He's one of the guys who was cut, the veteran they brought in, former commander. That never really took off, and it was pretty evident pretty quickly that Hancock and Hamlin were above him on the depth chart. And then you have Cam Lewis, who's your backup nickel, also has played plenty of safety for the Bills. So they've got guys who are versatile. Hancock is a former cornerback, too, in college. So they've got plenty of versatility here to deal with what's going on. It's just the outside corner, CB2, that's the big question mark at this point because of the uncertainty with Trey White and what's going to happen with Hairston when he's ramped up and ready to roll.
And, I mean, we'll move on to the offense, but you got to bring up Buffalo Joe Andreessen.
Yep.
Just because of, this time last year, that was the big story, that the local kid who basically got a tryout made the 53-man roster, and now Andreessen taking another step in his NFL career. I don't think there was any doubt he was going to be on the 53-man roster, but that game against the Chicago Bears was noticeable, preseason game number 2, that it wasn't like what we've seen from him in the past. It wasn't a Joe Andreessen type of game.
Yeah, Sean McDermott told us this, and we mentioned it on the podcast last week, that was not Joe Andreessen's best game, but they believe there's more in him, and they've seen it. Mm-hmm. So they're okay there. So it looks to me as though Andreessen continues his story and now is going to be a special teamer who's a guy that they're going to count on in that role. And then he'll probably be the backup to Tyrell Bernard at middle linebacker, which is pretty cool considering where we were this time a year and a couple of months ago, that he was undrafted and looking for tryouts with the Bills and the Chiefs before ultimately landing. So then at linebacker, Tyrell Bernard, Matt Milano, who's been awesome throughout this season, this preseason, Joe Andreessen, Dorian Williams, another young guy, probably Milano's backup. And then you've got the old vet, Shaq Thompson, who is versatile, can bring leadership, experience, and play both of those positions, the Mike and the Will. They cut Jimmy Charlo, the story on Hard Knocks, the guy from West Point who's battled injuries and thought perhaps his career was done. He seems like a perfect practice squad candidate to me, given his special teams ability. And then Edifuan Olufosio, another guy that just didn't pan out. Maybe he gets to the practice squad. Keontae Jenkins, another guy who's been banged up. He gets cut, but maybe he's back on the practice squad too.
That's another story with Charlo. Like, I was joking around with you before this. I was always curious with these guys from the military academies if they had to make a 53-man roster to not be pulled back in to serve. Mm-hmm. But from what I'm hearing now, if he gets to the practice squad, that still counts, which is cool.
We'll find out tomorrow.
Yeah, I guess we will.
Now to the fun part everybody's been talking about.
So here's the thing. We talk about Joe Andreessen and his story and making the 53-man roster. The guy I think everyone was rooting for this summer to get his shot and get to the 53-man roster, wide receiver Tyrell Shavers does it, breaks through. He's been with the team for a while now. He had that one highlight touchdown towards the end of last year when the backups were in, but now he's there. He's on the 53-man roster, will not be on the practice squad.
I mean, if you're Tyrell Shavers and you've been on the practice squad the last 2 years and you had a pretty good summer last year and you thought you had a good shot to make it and you don't, and you end up on the practice squad again, then you get your call up and you had the one catch, 69-yard touchdown.
Right.
Makes the stats look pretty good for your career averages, right? And then you come back this season and you just put together a solid preseason and training camp from start to finish. Dealt with an injury, fought through that, got back on the field, proved what he could do at wide receiver. And I think the Bills were pretty confident in what he can be as a wide receiver, and we saw it come to fruition throughout the preseason, and especially in that Bucs game, the fantastic one-handed catch. Then the question is, all right, can you play special teams? If you're not going to be one of the top 2 or 3 receivers, you've got to be a core special teams guy. Well, he went out and proved that he can be a gunner on punt return or on punt coverage. He can cover punts. He can be on the punt return team, kickoff return, all of those sorts of things, and he can be involved there and not be a liability. This guy has just done all the things they've asked of him, has impressed and flashed while doing it. What more can you ask for? And now it pays off for the guy making the 53-man roster in his 3rd year in the NFL.
How much do you think the game against the Buccaneers pushed him over the finish line to get to the 53-man roster? Because I remember him last year being like, oh, man, you're really pulling for this kid. And just throughout training camp, it seemed like the same camp he was having in Rochester. But then you see these flashes in games when you weren't seeing flashes from any other wide receivers this summer, that he was the one who stood out, that it just seemed like he's done so much to just prove that he can be out there as a wide receiver, and then you add all his work as far as special teams goes to get him to this point. But still, going into that final preseason game, I think there were still questions.
I don't know, but if he hadn't sewn it up, that certainly put the cherry on top, right?
Yeah.
That one-handed catch also made a play on special teams in that game with a big hit too. So I think it's the totality of the work, and last impressions often matter. So if he hadn't locked it up at that point, I'm sure that really put a feather in his cap. So now we talk about the wide receiver position. We talked so much. Would they keep Elijah Moore? Would they cut or trade Curtis Samuel and deal with the cap ramifications either way there? Turns out they keep 6, which is exactly what I thought they would.
Nailed it.
Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, Joshua Palmer, Elijah Moore, Tyrell Shavers, Curtis Samuel. And to me, that's a pretty nice rounded out receiving core. I'm not sure they have the alpha dog, but maybe one of these guys emerges in that. And I don't know that the Bills necessarily need that, want that, expect that. Everybody eats, right?
Yeah, I know. And that was the thing. Moore and Samuel both also dealt with injuries. Curtis Samuel, for the second year in a row, was nowhere to be seen, and I don't think he traveled to the Tampa Bay game.
I believe he was ill.
Yeah.
Our buddy Matt Perino reported that. Yep.
But with Moore, that was my big question mark coming down the stretch here. Like, did he do enough? Now, obviously, we've seen him shine at times during practice, but he had a rough go at it in some of the preseason games, and he was a big question mark for me. But at the same time, Andy, I always thought that when they brought him in, they had a plan for him, and that no matter how all this stuff went, excuse me, that plan still was in place, and that he wasn't going to lose being on the 53-man roster just by having some issues playing with Mitch Trubisky or Mike White or whoever.
Hey, before I get to that, we've got a viewer comment. Roy Collins on YouTube says, absolutely no surprises on cutdown day. Well, if you were following my 53-man roster projection, you wouldn't have been surprised. But thanks, Roy. Appreciate you listening and watching. We got 48 people watching right now, so that's pretty cool. As people come in and out of our streaming podcast live on YouTube and Facebook as well on the Spectrum News Buffalo Facebook page. But going back to Elijah Moore, the one thing I kept thinking about with him is what happened when Khalil Shakir went down against the Ravens and then was out against Houston. The Bills' offense stunk.
Oh.
And they had no real backup to the slot position. Like, yeah, Curtis Samuel can play it. Tyrell Shavers can play it. Keon Coleman, there's a lot of talk that he should play it.
Right.
But Elijah Moore is a natural backup to slot with Khalil Shakir if he's banged up. And remember, Khalil Shakir is banged up.
He's currently banged up.
Right. He's been dealing with a high ankle sprain. So I think the Bills didn't want to get in that spot where they didn't have a backup guy for each position, which is why you see 6 wide receivers here, right? So Keon Coleman, right? He's your X. Joshua Palmer's probably your Z. Khalil Shakir is your slot. Tyrell Shavers can probably primarily back up Keon Coleman at X. You've got Moore, who's slot but can play outside too. Samuel, who can play the Z behind Palmer, can play slot a little bit as well too. So you've got a well-rounded group that if somebody's banged up, things aren't going right, you can slide guys in and still make it happen. There's been talk that there's a lot of redundancy with the Bills wide receiver group. I don't necessarily see it that way because the way the Bills play the wide receiver position, they don't typically just, here's your 3 guys and we just run. Like there's a lot of formation stuff. They do tight sets. They do bunches. They do different things to where you don't need Keon Coleman out there at X all the time, right? Or he's sometimes inside and Shakir slides outside. It's just the way that Joe Brady runs his offense. So, I mean, overall, I think they didn't want to pass on Samuel and what they know he can be or has been in the past. Plus, there's the salary cap ramifications, too, as far as Samuel goes. Moore was $2.5 million guaranteed.
And I liked how Curtis played at the end of last year. I know I brought that up before, but it seemed like once he was healthy, he was what I thought the Bills were looking for in him throughout the year. I just think it took him a while to get up to speed, and once he did, I was good with him, even though he missed the entire summer. I figured he'd still be on the 53-man.
Availability matters, and we've talked about that, and we've given the Sean McDermott quote ad nauseum. But the idea of cutting him and eating that salary, and maybe you save a little bit of money, but you still don't have the guy, right? Or trading him. I think they wanted to go with their best guys, and they think Curtis Samuel can be one of their best guys. He's just had unfortunate injuries the last couple of seasons, but he's ramped up. He was unfortunately, I believe, ill for the Bucs game, which would have been a chance to see him a little bit more too. I'm not as high on Elijah Moore as I was like in the spring because he looked amazing.
Right.
He was okay during the preseason games. Had a couple of drops, but we'll see. I think he's a guy who's caught 60-some balls in this league, so it's not like he can't. He's useless, right?
Right.
And so I think you roll out with your best 6 guys to give you options. Here we are.
Yeah. The running back room shaped out how we figured it would. Frank Gore Jr. waived, another fan favorite during the summer with how he's performed during the preseason. Did Frank Gore Jr. do enough to get attention from other teams, or do you think he'll end up on the Bills practice squad?
Maybe, but they'd have to sign him to their 53.
Right.
So that just so rarely happens. And then when it does, it's usually not somebody you're like, oh, man, this guy that killed us to not have him.
The Jets will do it.
Right. So to me, Frank Gore is perfect practice squad. He's looked pretty good. He does what's asked of him. He does pass blocking, all those sorts of things. And if James Cook gets banged up, if one of the other two, Ray Davis, Ty Johnson, gets hurt, all right, Frank Gore, you're coming on up, right?
Yep.
And then who knows what's going to happen in the next few years with the roster. Maybe he can come up permanently, but you'd hate to see him go if you're a Bills fan, if somebody scoops him up, but I doubt that's going to happen because they'd have to put him right on their 53.
Backup quarterback, Mitch Trubisky, no surprise there. Tight end room, no surprise there.
I do wonder what they'll do with White and Buechele, if they'll keep 2 on the practice squad, if it's just Buechele or if it's just White. That'll be interesting to see. I mean, it's the third quarterback and third and fourth quarterbacks, but Buechele showed out in that that was awesome. Good for him, man.
Right.
Maybe even if he doesn't get the practice squad, maybe somebody else brings him on where he can easily be the third QB, or maybe somebody's thinking about a different backup, right?
I really thought Laviska Shenault had a chance at making the team as a backup wide receiver and a kick returner, but the Bills go with Codrington for both like they did last year.
Yeah. I think Codrington locked it up. Part of me did question, and I said this to some fellow media members down in Tampa, boy, they're playing him late into the game, returning punts, that sort of thing, Codrington, for a guy who you are expecting to be your kickoff return man. But I never saw anything from Shenault that made me think that he had ever vaulted Codrington. And he is a pretty good return man, right? And it's going to become even more important now with the touchback at the 35. Like, you're going to get more opportunities to return kicks. And if they have confidence in him in his second season and they like what he has, that's the guy they've rolled with.
Can I just say something?
Sure.
I don't think I've ever seen this before, but I'm looking at tight end. Tight end shaped out how we were. Zach Davidson gets waived. Zach Davidson coming into punt the other day and doing a good job.
Yeah.
And you put that on top of Ray Davis coming in to kick a field goal. To have 2 regular position players step in and do that. Like, I look at Zach Davidson, he's good to keep around in case you need a punter, because he's punted before, and he punted well when he got called on to do that. And you have Ray Davis kicking extra points. I'm not saying it's a huge deal. I just think it's funny. I don't recall ever seeing something like that in a preseason where you had players do that.
Yeah, I mean, Zach Davidson kicked the heck out of that ball. And then he got another one down inside the 20 at like the 15-yard line. So for a guy who who hadn't done it since college, but it was also a very good college punter.
Right.
That's a cool story. It's not a reason to keep him around.
No, I understand
And
it.
I would guess he'll probably be on the practice squad.
Yeah, I
But-
would assume so.
That is a funny thing to watch that guy boom a 60-some yard punt. And you're like,
it was
oh,
what?
Brad Robbins is sick, so here you go.
Because it's like when Ray Davis kicked the extra point, everyone's like, oh, that's so cool. And then, you're at the game. I'm watching the game on TV. And Zach Davidson coming into punt was just it just was a really cool thing. Like I said,
Yeah.
if you've been around the game for a long time, that's something that's like high school level stuff
Right.
that you're seeing.
Right. I mean, that was Ray Davis, was a high school kicker and a soccer player.
Yeah. Any surprise, Andy? We didn't even really get into the offensive line.
Yeah, we can dive into that a little bit. Not really surprised, but you get Deion Dawkins, Spencer Brown, David Edwards, Osiris Torrance, Connor McGovern, your starters.
Yeah.
That's a given. Alec Anderson, utility interior guy, can play the jumbo package. There was a little bit of what's going to happen with Ryan Vandemark and Chase Lunt, the rookie Lunt.
Right.
Was he going to outduel Vandemark for a swing or backup tackle spot? They're both on the roster. Tylen Grable, who was, to me, a roster given, still is, but now he's on IR to start the season with his concussion. And then, obviously, they are encouraged by Cedric Van Pran Granger to be good to go and probably can then back up Connor McGovern if he's fully healthy for week 1. So not a huge deal there, but I did find that interesting how that would all shake out. I even wrote in my projections, could they trade one of those guys, Vandemark specifically, for like a late round pick just to move him on, give him a chance to play if they weren't going to use him. But they roll with the 9. They'll have a decision to make once Grable is back, but maybe somebody gets cut then, whether that's Lunt, Vandemark, whomever. Or they cut at a different position and they go with 10 guys.
Right. Like we were talking about before we started, this is the initial 53-man roster. Things can still change.
Things will probably change within a couple of weeks, right? Like we've got the Jordan Phillips deal, right?
Right.
So Jordan Phillips, defensive tackle, back for his 4th stint, I believe signs to the 90-man roster, but then gets cut, and it's been reported he'll be going to the practice squad.
Yeah.
Which also made people wonder, are you going to do something with Dwayne Carter or with Daquan Jones? Do you need another defensive tackle body? I think they just like having Phillips around.
He's a good dude.
He's funny. He brings the juice. He's got the big parka he wears under his shoulder pads during practice in the winter. And, he's been one of their better pass rushers in the playoffs from the interior. I think he had the only sack of Mahomes in the playoff game last year in the AFC Championship game.
Worth having him around on the practice squad.
Sure.
Along with some of the other guys they're going to bring back in. We talk about Joe Andreessen. Let's talk about Sean Dolak.
Yeah.
Another UB guy. Led the nation in tackles with UB last year. And the young man, one of the Senecas. Where did he play high school?
He played at West Seneca East.
Okay.
And back when I covered a lot of high school football several years ago, he was a monster. And West Seneca East had a good program rolling at the time, and he was just everywhere, just beast.
Now he's on the Rams 53-man roster.
Yeah, linebacker. Obviously does well at UB and now has made the Rams 53-man roster as an undrafted guy, and it was embarrassing. I mean, this is an All-American.
Right.
He was an All-American. Doesn't get an invite to the Senior Bowl.
The Combine.
The Combine.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Obviously, whoever puts those things together missed on this guy.
Mm-hmm.
But for him, it's probably better because if he gets drafted in the 7th round, well, he doesn't have a choice where he's going. Now he finds himself in a situation where he's wanted by the Rams, and he played himself onto the field. And kudos to him and to Pete Lembo and his coaches before and to Jim Marino at West Seneca East.
Mm-hmm.
Really cool story. And now we've got 2 linebackers in back-to-back years.
It's really cool.
From basically neighboring towns, like Lancaster's right near West Seneca.
Yep.
Playing in the NFL at the same position, at middle linebacker.
It's
pretty
crazy.
cool. Yeah. So good for Sean Dolak. And I'm sure we'll hear more about that story in the coming days. He's not next door. He's not on the Bills, so I'm sure it won't be quite the same hullabaloo because Buffalo Joe was a sensation. But really good for Sean Dolak.
I'm sure our LA people will help us out.
Okay, right. Yeah.
Anything shock you from cut down day? Nothing pops into my head.
No.
I mean, you always look around for something. You see some names here and there, and it's, I thought this guy was doing well, but I didn't see anything that really.
I mean, notable guys. You talked in your report on TV today, Tommy DeVito, but that's not shocking for the Giants. Carson Steele, the fullback running back for the Chiefs that had done some things for them. He's cut. But, I mean, nothing that was outrageous, I don't think, at this point.
All right. And then finally, Hard Knocks continues. I think there's 2 more episodes, one this week and one next week. I'm sure everyone's dying to see the one next week with the roster decisions and stuff like that.
That's the juicy one to me.
Yeah.
But we're going to have the Bucs preseason game, and I'm sure Shavers will be a story again, and Jimmy Charlo and all those sorts of things. I know that I had a nice conversation with Jimmy Charlo at his locker after the game, and I think Hard Knocks was behind us filming at the time. So
there you go.
I'm sure they'll continue to build up cuts because I think they're like a week behind, basically.
Yeah.
So we'll see all those sorts of things. Perhaps the Trey White injury will pop in to this one.
Maybe they'll let everyone know what happened at Trey White.
Yeah, right.
Doubt it.
Take us in the training room.
Yeah.
Come on.
And we have Brandon Beane.
Brandon Beane Wednesday. We're obviously recording this Tuesday night after the roster cuts
and we'll
came
have
down.
one practice this week, so still more to come.
Hey, and we're going to have a special preview edition of Buffalo End Zone on television on Spectrum News in Buffalo and Rochester. Stevie Johnson, of course, former Bills great wide receiver, a part of that. We got some special stuff planned. We'll hear from Sean McDermott. We've got a special sit-down interview with a pretty big-name player that I think people are going to be interested in. I don't want to give it away yet because things happen and things fall through from time to time. But
yeah, you don't want to put that out there.
No bad juju.
No. So we'll be back. We're still debating. We'll see how Brandon Beane's press conference goes.
Yeah, maybe we're back
on
tomorrow.
On Wednesday. We'll see how it goes. If it's a lot of what Andy and I have already discussed, probably not, but probably at the end of the day. It's a late practice, though, Andy.
I got to say this. Every time we say, I don't know if we need to do a podcast or not, something happens.
Yeah.
And also, you guys just love this stuff. Bills fans, Bills Mafia, thank you. Because you keep pumping our numbers up and you want more and more and more, and we try to give it to you as often as possible.
Can't get enough. So
real football, Baltimore Ravens. We can start talking about that after tomorrow.
And for our show and our podcast moving forward, I have a very different take on my outlook of this season coming up.
Really?
Yeah.
In the wrong direction?
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Now, I don't know. I'm still sitting on it, but
okay.
Stay
tuned for you pessimistic Bills fans for Kevin Carroll's hot take.
At this stage, it's just a thought.
Okay.
But we'll get more into that down the road as we get ready for the regular season starting next week. But for now,
comment, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff that I tell you to do every time. You do it.
Yep, just do it. Thanks for watching, everyone, and listening.